This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. And I have Alan Klein back with us, which I'm really excited about. Um, Alan, you just celebrated a birthday last week. So for everybody out there, I'm not going to thrill you with my terrible voice. I'm not going to sing. I'm just going to wish you a happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you.
uh, so we were talking before we got online, and we were talking about the fact that you've written a book, you have another book coming out, you're 85 years, and I'm going to say young, because when I think of old, I really think of when my grandparents were in their 70s and 80s. They acted old. Okay. They didn't look for new things. Their best thing in their life was when their grandchildren and their children came to visit. Um, but our world has changed drastically since then. I saw it with my parents that even though my dad suffered from bad health a good portion of their life, he still managed on his good days and on his so days to get out and appreciate life. Um, and you said you did that. You were traveling last week for your birthday. So, what's it like for you? Because I know there are so many of your contemporaries out there who are just sitting around just waiting for, I don't even want to say the end, because they're just sitting around waiting for something. And you
Mm,
refuse to do that.
yeah, well, one thing I do, Karen, on my milestone birthdays is I like to create memories for people. Because I think that's what we're doing in our life. We're really creating memories for people. When people die, you go, oh yeah, I remember the time when we went to this, or we had this really good laugh, or and so always celebrate my milestone birthday with a big event. So this is not going back to last week when I was traveling, but what's coming up next month is I grew up in New York City. I love Broadway shows. I was taken to Broadway shows when I was 7 years old. I reword, Broadway songs with my own words in the shower, around the house. Um, and so what I'm creating is in 2.5 weeks, I've I've written a script about how Broadway shows have influenced my life, what they meant for me, and what I've learned from them, and how they helped me to get on and be joyful in my life. And I've hired 4 singers and a pianist and a nightclub.
Oh,
and
wow.
and I've invited 85, well, I invited more than 85 people, but about 85 are coming um, for a 45-minute to an hour Broadway type show.
I, y- that's absolutely wonderful, because typically we don't even plan our own parties. When you were growing up, that was your mother. She made, decided, yes, you can have a birthday party this year. And she, helped you choose the theme. And if she was anything like my mother, it was the theme that she wanted, not necessarily my theme.
Right.
Um, and then as you get a little bit older, maybe you go out with your buddies for a drink for your birthday. So there's all different ways of celebrating. But typically, we don't plan our own party, and you are planning like a mini Broadway theme. How, I mean, like,
Well,
that
you,
is
you
absolutely wonderful.
you know how that came about? I was thinking that would be when I die and this is a celebration of my life. I'd want all people singing Broadway songs. And I
Okay.
thought, wait a minute, why wait till I die? I want to be part of this. I want to hear it.
That is the attitude we all should take, you know? Um, I
you
was
know,
t
s-
yeah,
yeah.
I was
So I'm
talking
creating this memory for people. Yeah, and I'll be part of it.
and
Hopefully, I'll be
yeah,
here in 2.5 weeks to
you'll be
to,
here.
to
You'll be
celebrate
here.
it. Yeah.
You know,
Uh,
we I was telling somebody recently, that, you know, we plan for the birth of a child. We plan for all those milestones. And some people do prepare for their death, but not to the point of um, really letting the people who are going to be left behind what is really important to them. You know, we assume these things. Um, so 4 weeks ago today, my son called me up at about 8:30 in the evening. Everything was fine. An hour later, he called me and he was crying in pain.
Mm.
And he said he had chest pains. Now he's 32 years old. And I said, you know, you live a stressful life like I do. Call 911. I hope it's not your heart, but I don't want to be on the phone talking to you and you have, no, mom, it's not my heart. To make a long story short, he kept me on the phone for 12 hours.
Wow.
He wanted me to be his lifeline. Finally, Thursday morning, he made a call to EMS. They came and got him. They took him to the hospital. It was not his heart. He had a gallbladder that was about to burst.
Oh, wow.
And it made me sit there with him because I flew down to Texas to be with him. And I sat there next to him and I said, a parent is not supposed to lose their children. And you've got too much going. If you ever have pain again that is not identifiable, that you can't just take an aspirin and get rid of it, you got to call 911. And he's laying in his hospital bed and he says, but mom, you know, insurance doesn't pay for everything.
Oh,
And it was like, we can't worry about those things. The
right.
same way as we want to enjoy ourselves as we get older. We may not have the funds that we had when we were younger, but we can still have fun. We can still make those memories. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
let's not
Yeah.
throw
And
them away.
it doesn't have to be a big birthday party for 85 people.
Yeah.
You know, one of my birthdays was an eat dessert first birthday party. And I went to Costco and I bought like a dozen desserts. And I invited people for that. And then we went down the hill and had some takeout, you know, Chinese or no, it was Thai food. It wasn't very expensive, but it was a very fun event. Again, you know, just create a fun event for people, for yourself.
Well, and it's your
Yeah.
birthday, you should be celebrating. So yes.
So
Um,
that's what I did. But I was also the reason I was traveling, I was working. I belong to the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor.
okay.
It's the country's leading therapeutic humor organization. And I was the closing keynote speaker. So, you know, talking about getting older and aging in 85. Yeah, stuff in my body is not working as well as it used to. I have glaucoma. My eyes are getting worse and worse. So it was kind of a challenge for me to get on a plane. And then, of course, there was mechanical problems and we had to change planes and I had to walk for what seemed miles, you know, but you do it. And I think it's those things that those challenges that keep me young, keep me going, keep me, you know, I have a friend, unfortunately, he's been depressed for like 40 years and he doesn't want to get out of the bed in the morning, you know, he's just, and it's these planning things in the head that, you know, still try to do things at least that I've done all my life or have bring me joy and pleasure that gets me out of bed in the morning, that
Well,
gets me, you know, I have more stuff to do in the day than the hours in the day. And other friends of mine they go, oh, they're so bored. They don't know what to do. And I go, how could you be bored? There's so much to do in life, you know?
well,
Um,
and
yeah.
that to me is very sad when I hear things like that. And I think I shared this with you before. Um, for most of my adult life, I just thought I had to work, whether it was at the job or at home, always trying to make somebody else, happy. And when I started to realize, hey, I'm missing something, you know, um, why am I working so hard and I'm really not getting anywhere? I plateaued. And when I left corporate America, I won't say the first day I was ecstatic with my life, but I was looking ahead of all the things that I could do, and
Mhm.
very few of them were going to cost me any money. And my husband and I have now learned to really enjoy things as a couple. Um, you know, our younger son laughs at us. He says, every time the two of you go out to eat, you share a meal. Well, the reality of it is, we typically like the exact same thing, and neither one of us has a huge appetite. So we could each have our own meal and then take something home with us, or, we can banter about what we're going to eat, which is a great conversation, and then share a meal. I said, right now, it's not so much about what it's costing as to the fact that, hey, we like doing this, and why
Yeah.
not?
You remind me of my parents. They would always share a meal, but they would get the little cup of chicken noodle soup and they would share that. But then they would start yelling at each other that
Oh,
you ate all the noodles and you didn't leave me any noodles.
we haven't gotten to that point yet.
You might.
We still may get there, but you are so right. We can find those things to do, and I'm sure a lot of your friends, um, you know, have the ability to do more than maybe just sit on a park bench. Now, there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do.
Right.
Um, but let's get back to the reason you were on this trip, because you're talking about humor, and humor is what really can be the best medicine for all of us.
Yeah, well, that's what this organization teaches, therapeutic humor, not just for people who are ill, but teachers need it, nurses need it. People are so stressed out, and it's a way of if I tell you a little joke or we laugh together, you're lifted above, you forget about your stress, right? You
Absolutely.
forget about what's annoying you. You get at least momentarily stop thinking about your illness,
Yes,
which allowing your body to heal even just for a little while. And so that's why it's so important. We so forget about it. How could I laugh at a time like this? People say, or the person died. How could we laugh at that? Well, you may have had great memories with them and laughed a lot. Why shouldn't you keep that memory alive through the
exactly. Well,
reminding yourself of the laughter?
and I'm glad that you said that, because when I was 9 years old, my mother's mother passed away very suddenly, and as we were sitting Shiva, uh, I'm a 9-year-old, and so I'm observing some weird things going on, because you know my grandmother just died, and you're sitting over here and you're telling stories about her and you're laughing. And I remember walking up to my mother saying, "Why are you laughing? Shouldn't you be crying?" And my mother said, "I've cried and I'll cry again. I want you to sit here and hear this story about your grandmother when she came to the new world." And I said, "Why?" And I sat there. Next thing I'm listening, and I'm giggling as this little kid.
Right.
And that was my first observation, that even at a time of mourning, you bring out the happiness and the memories.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't remember the Jewish saying exactly, but there's one about the way to keep a deceased person's memory alive is to tell their story, tell stories about them,
Well,
and that's
and
so beautiful.
yes. So, humor therapy. I have a friend who's a musician, and she was going into the hospice organizations in her hometown, and she plays the harp. So she has a mini harp, and she was doing this for years. And then somebody talked to her about laugh therapy, and she became a laugh therapist.
Great.
And first time I heard it, it was like, I don't get it. And she goes, no, I think you do. And she helped me through the last 2.5 months of my mother's life, because my mother was a terrible person to repeat a joke. And so we would sit there with my mother and we'd say, tell the one about the horse, tell the one about this. And she knew just enough, and she ruined it even more. And we captured all the laughter on
Great.
video. And I go back and listen to that even 6+ years later, because those were good memories.
Yeah, exactly. I'd like to share with you what you mentioned, hospice and music. And I had a very touching, I guess it would be. I used to be a hospice volunteer, and one of my patients was an avid concert goer, loved music, classical music. And she had season tickets to the San Francisco Symphony, but she couldn't go. She was too ill. And I thought, how can we bring music to her? So I called up the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. They teach students, a lot of really good students there. And I said, is there any way you could get a student or two to come over to her house and play music? Because we investigated, maybe we can have a gurney and take her in the symphony in the back. None of that worked. And they sent over the student, and the family got around and they played some, I forget, it was, I don't know what instrument, it was so long ago, but they, that person, the student, did a mini concert for the whole
Oh,
family
how
with the dying
wonderful.
woman. And after it was over, we asked the woman, how was that? What was that like for you? And she said, that was the best concert I have ever been to. It was just so, so wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes we don't think about these things at that time. Um, I was very grateful when my mother got ill that we had friends who were connected with hospice, and so I knew eventually we were going to have to call them in. So I called my friend and I said, just give me some background information. And I said, because my mother doesn't know that she's ill. Okay. She had had a stroke. Um, she lost her sight, but she swore she could see. And even being bedridden, she pictured that she was getting up doing things around the house. So I said to her, what can we offer her? And so she went through a number of things, but music was one. And we had this young girl come in, and my mother loved jazz music. So she came in with this electric guitar. I had no idea what she was going to do with it, but she created the most beautiful jazz music on this guitar. And my mother just was like smiles from ear to ear. Uh, and again, that's a memory now that I have, because
Right.
I was with her. But we saw those bits and pieces of how the things that you love can spark you even in the worst of times.
Right. You think I can get a big Broadway chorus to come and sing at my
Oh, I
bedside?
would love to see that happen.
Uh,
I mean,
so,
I have a few connections, but I don't know if they'll be free that night. So.
yeah, by
Uh,
the way, I'd love to mention, since we're talking about hospice, look at all the little note things. This is one of my books.
Embracing life after loss. Great.
Yeah, and I got into the humor field because my wife had a rare liver disease and we always laughed a lot together. But after she died, I start reading grief books, and they were so fat and thick and hundreds of pages, which I didn't have patience to
Right.
read. And they told me how I might lose my appetite, I might lose my sleep, I might be depressed. And they were making me more depressed.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so I thought, I don't need a book like that. I need a book that's easy to read, simple to read, encouraging, uplifting. And it was hard to find. And so I wrote my own. So for your listeners that need a book like this, that's out there.
We will put that in the show notes, and especially because we do another podcast on here called Grief Belief.
Mm,
I have 4 grief counselors that head up the team. I should call them coaches actually. And 3 of the 4 have lost their husbands, and
wow.
um, at different stages of life. And then the 4th individual, um, her loss is estrangement from one of her children. And the reason I wanted to put this podcast together was that I even remember when my mother was dying, people would come, to visit, and they'd say, "Have you had a chance to cry yet?" And it's like, every once in a while I would tear up, but I was taking care of my mom. I didn't take the time.
The
And then
time.
even when she
Mm,
passed away, somebody said to me at the funeral, um, "You haven't really cried." I
mm,
said, "You know what? When I need to cry, I will. Don't tell me I have to cry. I have feelings. I know
mhm.
what I'm missing." Um, and because of that and a few other things, I went to these coaches and I said, "We need to talk about this because we all grieve differently. Some of us are going to take it to our graves, and that could be a long time in grief.
Mhm.
Others, you know, they'll find something that they can move on to. It's not that they're forgetting, but they've got to live their life.
Right,
And
right,
we've got to discuss that is real.
right.
For you, that had to have been difficult because you were taking care of your wife all that time.
Yeah, yeah, I was a caregiver. Yeah, yeah, and taking care of my daughter too, who was she was 10 when her mother died. So she, from 7 to 10, when Ellen had the rare liver disease, um, we were experiencing loss. And there's loss every day. You get a flat tire, you don't get the job you want. You break up in a friendship, there's big losses, little losses, but we go some of that grief process all the time.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. Um,
yeah.
it's like my husband got this at 73, he finally got a full-time job after the last 12 years being on his own. And a week after he got the job, somebody else called him for an interview. And he was honest to say, "Well, I took this job, but I still would like to be interviewed." And they said, "No, we're just going to move on." That was a huge loss for him.
Mm-hmm.
He likes what he's doing, but it's an hour drive to work, an hour drive home. And so it was like this other one was basically around the corner. But I saw almost immediately in him his demeanor change for a day or so. Um, it was like, why did I say anything? Uh, and all I could say to him was, "Do you like what you're doing?" And he goes, "Yes, I just don't like the drive." So now
Mm-hmm.
we have figured that out that early in the morning when he's driving, um, typically he calls me, even though he's just left the house, but we haven't had time to talk before he leaves. So that's our, 45 minutes or so of talk. At the end of the day, he typically calls our youngest son because he's
Mm,
available to talk at that
mm,
time.
yeah.
And so now he looks at it as this isn't a loss at all. He has gained something.
Right. And you know that it's a wonderful story you're telling, because people think, oh, this didn't go right. I didn't like this. I don't like this setup. I have to drive an hour. there's always opportunity in all of those things.
Absolutely.
You know, when I used to be a scenic designer at CBS Television, and then they were moving to the West Coast and they didn't take any of the designers, I thought it was a huge loss.
Oh,
But it
absolutely.
freed me up, and actually something happened in my life. I had no more job, and it was freed me up to actually move to San Francisco, where my wife was from, and we always wanted to live. Otherwise, I would be still stuck in New York City. So, you know, I always look at when things don't go right, when my plane is delayed or canceled, which it was on the trip I just took. And we had to get a different plane, mechanical problems, you know, hours and hours of waiting. I got a seat next to this wonderful woman, and we chatted, and she's on many boards, and she was going for a little holiday, and we had just had a lot in common, and it made the trip go so quickly. You never know, you know.
Well, and that's because when you're in that maze and you hit the wall, you have to look both ways and turn around and see what's behind you because there
Right.
is another way to go, but you have to make that choice. And it's not always easy. Um, you know, when when I realized I was depressed and I left corporate America, the first couple weeks were really tough because I knew what my role had been for 10 years. I was leaving my students and I didn't want to leave them and I wanted to be in contact with them. And I just sat here like, there's nothing for me to do. Who's going to hire me now? I'm in my 60s. And it was almost just getting that into my head that I said, I'm going to do what I want to do. And I don't know how I found them at first, but there was this medical supply company that I saw that they were looking for somebody to write blogs for their magazines. So I called them up, and even without a resume, nothing, I got the job.
Great.
And
Yeah.
so as I started writing them, I saw, well, there's more that I want to do. I want to talk about these things. And that's, how I started podcasting because there's information out there. And if only one person's listening, that's fine. They're getting the information.
Yeah.
But I hear so many other people who say to me, oh, I lost my job at 60. I lost my job at 40. Oh, woe is me. Well, if you want, you can sit there in your
Yeah.
rocking chair and waste the time away. You
Yeah.
won't.
There's always opportunity, you know, and no matter what age. I don't know. I don't know exactly who, but a number of major composers wrote the big symphony when they were like 80 or 90.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
uh, in a way, age doesn't matter. People tell me I never age. You know, they say I looked this way when I was 40, you know, I don't know. But you know, we go on with life, and my thing is to try to enjoy much as I can in life, as much as my body will allow. Sure, I can't do things I used to do, but I still can do some of that, or even if I can't do any of it, there are other things I can do that I haven't
Absolutely.
done. Yeah,
Absolutely.
so like I have a piano because my daughter used to play piano, but she's grown and out of the house. It sits there. And I thought one day when I retire, I want to learn how to play piano. The problem is I'm not retired. So I don't know if that will happen, but it's there. I'd like to learn how to play it one day, and
Sure.
it's the
Well, I
goal. Yeah.
I have a friend in San Francisco. She will be 87 this summer. She is a writer. Um, COVID really scared her, and I understand why, because being in a big city like San Francisco, there everywhere you walk, there's another person.
Hmm.
Um, and she does like her aloneness, as she said. Not lonely. She likes to be alone. Um, and she was doing a podcast with me for a while, and it just was interrupting some writing that she really wanted to do. And we spoke last week. In fact, I had her on my pod, and we were talking about the fact that she feels that she has done her best writing in the last year or so. And I'm
Wow.
so happy for her because this is her passion. This is what she loves to do. Um, she was online teaching for a while, and then, they chose that they didn't need her anymore. And I'll never forget that conversation. She kept saying, "They don't pay me a lot. My students, are calling me because I'm not teaching anymore. Why couldn't they have kept me?" And then she finally got over it. She said, "Okay, well then I'm going to do what I do best." So, you know,
Yeah. Well,
oh,
I, believe in your passion. It's your passion that will get you through. You may not get paid. I didn't get paid when I became a speaker. I got free lunch. Come
yeah.
speak for
Hey,
our meeting and we'll give you free lunch,
yep,
and then we'll give you $25 and then 250 and then 2,500 and you know, my thing is you get good at what you're doing and people will pay you for it. The same thing, my
absolutely.
daughter's an artist and she wasn't making much money and now she does pretty well with her artwork. But I think you gotta have that passion. And I got that from my dad. Every Friday he was a printer and he worked for someone else. And every Friday they'd have a rush job and would come home late and he loved printing, but he hated having a boss over him. He hated being yelled at if things didn't go right. Um, and he really needed to work for himself, but he could never, do that. But I think if you try to do work for yourself, because then you only have yourself to blame, if something goes wrong, but if something goes right, you'll be so happy.
It's interesting. My dad, when I was growing up, had a decent job. Okay. Um, it didn't excite him, but he was good at it. But one day he was watching, I don't know if it was National Geographic or something like that, and they were talking about raising rabbits for their fur. So next thing I know, he checks into it. About a month later, he's out in our garage building coops for the rabbits that he's now going to go out and buy. And he just had this passion for it.
Mm,
And he like pulled all of us into it, of course, because, you know, these rabbits were going to be in the garage and they needed to be fed at certain times. And if he wasn't home, and he eventually took it from our garage and rented a space on a farm, which was near where he actually worked. So on his way to work and after work, he'd stop there. He said those were the happiest years of his life when he was
wow,
working for someone else because the beginning of the day, it was his. At the end of the day, it was his.
it is, yeah,
And, you know, I didn't recognize it growing up. But as I got older and thought about it, he loved his rabbits. And
right,
eventually,
right,
if you were selling them for your fur, you were selling them for meat as well. And so he was making extra money. Um, he never told anybody how much he made.
uh,
He put it in a canister. Um, and from what I understood, it was a hefty amount when he opened up that canister. And he could then look back at it and say, you know what? I enjoyed it, but now here's the fruits of my labor too.
right.
So,
I'm glad my dad did not raise rabbits because we lived in the Bronx in a fifth floor walk-up apartment
oh,
building. That would have been hard.
that would have been very hard. Yes.
Yeah. Although New York, yeah, growing up in New York City, I remember sitting on the subway once. Someone had a chicken on their lap, a live chicken in the subway.
Wow, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, yeah. And this was awful. I sat once to a dead next to a dead person on the subway.
Oh
And I
my.
didn't know they were dead because the train went from like 59th Street to 125th Street. And so never stopped. And I just thought they're sleeping.
How did you find out they had died?
I think what happened at the final stop, they like fell over.
Wow.
It was so weird. New York City is with so many weird things, yeah. But
Well,
fun
it's
too.
it's so big and everybody wants to be there. So you're all different individuals there. But like any other place, you got to be careful. You got to be careful walking
Oh
down the
yeah,
street,
yeah. Oh
everything
yeah.
else.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So are
Uh,
you going to have somebody tape or video your production for your birthday?
it's kind of just for personal use. We're just
Okay,
having one camera and one sound thing, not high professional, just so we have a record of it.
absolutely.
And
Because
I
I'm
know with live theater, you never know what's going to happen. So we got to record whatever happens.
And is your daughter coming in for your event?
She lives in the city,
Okay.
but my brothers and his girlfriend are coming in from Connecticut. I have friends coming from Ann Arbor, somebody coming from Las Vegas, coming from New York City. It's a
Okay.
big to do here.
Well, it's exciting that you're getting people from Ann Arbor because they have to be Michigan fans. And I'm a Michigan fan.
Oh,
So,
there you
hey,
go. Yeah,
go
yeah.
blue.
Great.
So, your next book is coming out in July. Is that
No, no,
correct?
no. The Awe Factor already came out.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I don't. People keep asking, this is the current book, The Awe
Okay.
Factor. But I'm not officially writing another book. I was writing the new keynote that I just gave. I was writing the script for the party. So I am writing. And
Yes.
then I'm writing little vignette stories, like 2 to 3 pages, about incidents in my life. Whether that will be a book or not, I don't know. But stories like the time I was in the men's room with Robert Redford,
Ooh,
stories like
interesting.
that. I don't know. I have 40 of them written, so it might become a book. Um, but if it's interesting story, funny, sad, touching, whatever, I wanted to get it on paper, and
Well,
I'll s-
very important. I know
yeah,
that uh,
yeah.
we did a sit down video with my parents many, many years ago. Um, and we had them tell us all different stories about them growing up, about their parents, about their siblings. Um, and the one that struck my youngest son the most was that my grandfather, my father's father, and his brother, so my great uncle, I guess I would call him, uh, they loved baseball. And behind their mother's back, um, they joined one of the barnstorming teams of baseball and they played right alongside of Ty Cobb.
Wow.
And my father talked about it in there, and my son two or 3 years ago was at the Hall of Fame, and he had a connection to get into the records department. And he saw the official for this team, and my grandfather, his brother. But the reason they didn't go on, when their mother found out, she said, only bums play baseball.
Wow. Uh,
And she told them they had to go out and get jobs.
wow.
And that was the end of their baseball career.
Oh,
But
too bad.
my son says that's probably where his love for baseball came about. Um, and it's so exciting when you hear these stories and then you find the documentation on them. It's they
Yeah,
become more than stories. They become part of your
yeah.
heart.
And, I used to be a scenic designer for CBS television and work for Merv Griffin, Jackie Gleason, Ed Sullivan, Captain Kangaroo. So I have all these stories from that era, and then growing up in the Bronx, and then my speaking career stories, and my writing author stories, and
Well, I'm going to introduce you to one of my other podcasters. His name is Ken Ludmer. He actually lives in New Jersey across the river. He does podcasting for us as well. And he is a storyteller as well. And I think the two of you in a podcast telling your stories, because he grew up on the streets of New York.
wow.
He saw a lot of things happening that probably a young boy should not have seen, but he did.
Yeah,
And
that'd be
so
great. Yeah.
I think it would make a great podcast. And Alan, I love talking to you. You make me feel, you inspire me just to want to go out and do one more thing today.
Yeah. Well, do it.
I
Do it.
will.
Go do one thing and then let me know what you did.
I will. I
And also, we
absolutely
didn't
will.
talk too much about therapeutic humor and laughter, but um,
Oh,
here's my signature note that gets other people laughing, smiling, myself, smiling, laughing when I put this on. So, want to
it,
leave your listeners with this kind of image.
I appreciate it. Have a beautiful day, and we'll
You
talk to you again
too. Thank
soon.
you, Karen.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye now.